Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And we are today going to talk to a local literary light. His name is Leo Litwak. He has written a novel called Home for Sale, which is published by a local publisher by the name of Leo Literary Arts. Did I do that pretty well?
You did that fairly well.
Oh, fairly well. It's not really, it's Leon.
Not perfect, but sufficient.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for sufficiency. You've been around a long time. You originally from Detroit?
I was originally from Detroit. That was ages ago. I left Detroit when I was about 18 to go into the Army. And that was World War II, by the way.
Yes, that one. And then you came out of the Army and migrated to California right away, or?
No. I got a teaching job in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
I was at Washington University for about 10 years, and then I came out here and taught at San Francisco State for many, many years.
You've won a lot of prizes or endowments as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
The Anne and Robert Cowan Award,
mm-hmm.
and both the Guggenheim and National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships. And you've written quite a bit. 2 novels, 2 works of nonfiction, a short story collection, and articles in such publications as the New York Times Magazine, Tikkun. That's the local. Is that still being done locally? Tikkun?
Yeah, actually, it was a story of mine that was in Tikkun, but I've written for many. I've written for many places.
And then above and beyond all of that, you've been a professor at San Francisco State University for more than 30 years. What is it you're professoring out there?
I was both in the English department and what later came to be the creative writing department.
Uh-huh.
And that too seems like ages ago. I've been retired for some time.
Enjoying it?
Retirement's turned out to be very fruitful for me. And yes, I do enjoy it. In fact, prefer it to full employment.
Well, that's nice. In what ways fruitful?
In what ways?
Fruitful.
Fruitful in that I concentrated on the writing. It was rather difficult, both teaching and writing.
Yeah.
And now I just became more efficient and also doing something I love to do.
Great. That's great. Now, this book, Home for Sale,
mm-hmm.
It's set in Detroit.
Yes.
In the 1950s, and that's kind of post-Korean War time.
Yes.
And there's a real estate boom going on.
Right.
And there are fat cats selling homes fast and furious to veterans. And
Detroit was growing. It was being developed at a ferocious pace. After the war, the auto industry was retooling, and they were putting out cars at a very rapid pace, and they needed workers from everywhere. And during the war, they needed workers for the various arms industry
mm-hmm.
in Detroit. And it turned out that they brought lots of laborers from the South, both black and white, and that to some extent produced a problem. The city was just jammed, and Detroit was like many Midwestern towns, a series of ethnic enclaves,
mm-hmm.
and it seems that you were very comfortable in your own enclave, but a little uncomfortable when you wandered from it. And black people were confined to a very small part of Detroit, and the city realtors more or less conspired to keep them enclosed. and that produced huge problems.
Yeah, it became almost a tinderbox for social unrest, and
It
protest.
was,
Yeah,
yes.
and some very terrible things in terms of keeping the blacks in place.
Yes.
At all costs.
I use it as a source book, kind of marvelous history of that time by a man named Thomas Sugru.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for the first time, came across a picture that was familiar of an event that was familiar to most black people, but not to many Detroiters.
Uh-huh.
And that was a wall built to separate the black population from the white population.
You're kidding.
No.
Actually, a wall? I'm thinking of...
It was 6 feet high
Uh-huh.
and about 2 feet thick of cement, and I think it still exists. Although Detroit's now substantially a black city.
Is it? Oh. That's terrible that it works out that way, but so it will.
Well, what's happened is that Detroit has declined hugely in population.
Mm-hmm.
It's now, I think, about 700,000, and at the time it was 2 million.
In some ways, Home for Sale is the story of two graduates of the Margaret Tressler Home who couldn't be more different. We'll meet them when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Today on Conversations on the Coast, we're talking to a retired professor who's keeping very busy writing. His name is Leo Litwak, and the title of his new novel is Home for Sale, published by El Leon Literary Arts. And I'm getting better at that, I think. I don't know. There is a very fine country writer who has some very nice things to say about a short story collection of yours called Nobody's Baby. Maxine Hong Kingston is the woman, and she writes, "Long after reading these stories, I find myself feeling for everybody. Laurie, Paula, Shirley and Wesley, Alice and her son Emery, Heartless Willie, what a great name. The people in Leo Litwak's fine stories make the reader laugh and cry. Nobody's Baby is at once fun and tragic, a most satisfying book." And I don't know why, but it makes me want to ask you this question. You've obviously written in both forms, the novel and the short story. Mm-hmm. With which are you more comfortable, or you favor one over the other?
I do when I'm working on them. I favor the short stories when I'm writing short stories.
Uh-huh.
I favor the novel when I'm writing novels. I'm committed to the last thing I've done.
That's a good thing to be, I think.
Yeah, it keeps you going.
And politically safe. Politically safe. To get to the two orphans who are the main characters of the book, one is named Elton Kramer. And Elton is, in some ways, I guess, the personification of the hotshot real estate agent in a hot market. He's got the clothes. He has a car that has a peculiar horn, which plays what we used to call "Come and get your beans, boys. Come and get your beans." Right.
Right.
And he's on his way up. He talks about being on his way up constantly. And then the other orphan is totally different, Eugene Victor Smith. And from his very name, he's different. He was named by his parents after Eugene V. Debs, a socialist anarchist activist. And he doesn't belong in real estate, and he knows it, but it takes him a while to get out. Where did you dream up these guys? They're so marvelous.
Well, I really played off the differences between Eugene and Elton. What I wanted to do, my general idea of the novel was to get at the issue of development and of growth,
Mm-hmm.
and of the peril that they invited. At one point, Eugene asks a class he's teaching, "What would you like for Detroit if it were possible to keep it small,
Mm-hmm.
to keep it just a tiny village with no growth, with no development?" And the students didn't want such a Detroit because it would exclude them. They were all they were all blue collar people and of a later generation, and they would have nothing to do with a tiny village. So the idea then is that if you don't want to keep Detroit small, you have to let Detroit grow, and the consequence of unbridled growth is disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a consequence of staying small is a disaster. So the issue is, what do we do with development? What are we developing? Where are we going? Where are we growing? And the Detroit seemed to exemplify the problem. Detroit exploded, as you know. And
one of the things that it seems to me that you need to have a real estate boom is a lot of people participating in the game, and that's why Elton wanted Eugene to become part of the show,
right?
And he does for a while, but there's another person that he brings in, and I was really surprised when this person went into the real estate game. I'm talking about Kate Wyman, who, when she first comes on the scene, seems to me to be a real idealistic individual, one who cares for those who need caring, these orphans at the place where she works. But she got sucked in too, so to speak.
I did see her, as you did, as a marvelous caregiving person. But on the other hand, she bought into the mystique of Detroit. She, for instance, considered Henry Ford to be the very model of what a man should be. And she wanted her orphans to grow up in his shadow.
That's right. I had forgotten that. Yeah, she was very much devoted to Henry.
Yeah.
One would hope it was, but you didn't say it this way, that it was because he could give a lot of jobs to her boys. But I suppose that was part of it. But she saw him as much more.
Well, she also felt that what they needed was a center, and that required discipline, and that meant that they had to be formed in a relatively safe manner, and that manner was the manner that Detroit had established.
Once that's established, then the real estate thing will keep going and so on. There's a description of another man in this real estate game. I'm going to start it, and we'll finish it when we come back. Chest in, paunch out. We want people to practice that at home, and if they can get chest in and paunch out, they'll become a real estate millionaire. Stay tuned. This is an instructive program.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Home for Sale, that's the book I've been reading. It's a novel by Leo Litwak, published by the L. Leon Literary Arts. And there's another real estate mogul in this book. And the way you describe him at one point, I think, is so perfect. I'm going to read it verbatim. you say of this man, his last name is Sermon, and what's his first name?
Andy.
Andy Sermon. What a name! And he is. This is the way he's described at one point: sleeves rolled up, a lordly slouch, chest in, paunch out, tall, and immediately at ease. Huh? This is a guy who could sell ice cubes to Eskimos. and he comes upon the scene, and he's the one, in my mind at least, who is attractive to Kate, and I think is the one responsible for her going someplace where I'm sure she never wanted to go.
He's a powerful presence, and he's enormously successful in his trade. And he's very attracted to Elton, whom he sees as a kind of shadow of himself.
Yeah. A perfect apostle, if you will. Yeah. One of the unusual aspects of Home for Sale, I think, is the powerful prologue that you've written. I loved it so much it made me want to read the whole book. And I'd like you to read just a bit from that prologue. This is, in a sense, how did he get the main character? How did he get to Detroit? And he got there because his dad said it's time to get the hell out of Syracuse and strike off in a new direction. And so they're doing that.
Yeah, his dad is, from one point of view, quite disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
From another point of view, somewhat of a seer. And they start out for a long trip where he hopes to recover his origins. We drove with only 2 quick stops, and by dawn had reached the outskirts of Detroit. It was barely dawn. I was half asleep, couldn't make out where we were. In hell, perhaps. Billowing flames from an open hearth furnace reddened the sky. Outside, a hiss like the sound of an enormous steam iron. I saw the chimneys of the Ford River Rouge plant in Dearborn. The land hissed and breathed fire. Dad tensed, and I saw what he saw, something enormous in the shadows far down the road. Perhaps a billboard or a silo, vague yet ominous with its thread of motion, edging on the road, unstable as if it would fall or leap, a silo that could topple or a billboard that was alive. The shadowy light bred illusions. "Oh, Lordy," Dad said. Mom asked, "What is it?" "Oh, Lordy." He slowed down but kept going even after the shape was defined. I could dismiss it as possibly a hoax meant to flim-flam tourists, 2-headed buffaloes or 100-foot anacondas. It resembled something from the Saurian age, armor-plated, on its haunches, with claws spread chest high. We all saw something. Mom asked, "What is that?" irritated by the malice of those who had placed it there to alarm us. I came from sleep, and there were fires all around, and the huge stacks with that dawn light. There were specters everywhere. What I saw was at first a silo backlit by open hearth, and then, perhaps for an instant, this serpent, and I heard deep, steamy respiration. It was Dad turning to me, his eyes swallowed by the pupils as they were with Mrs. Alfieri, saying, Didn't I tell you? Isn't it so?" Who fixed that object clearly in all its details, vivid, unmistakable, and I saw that enormous reptile and its armored outstretched claws, fire in its mouth. "Isn't it so?" Exultant, as though this were final proof of what? that they never had a right to stick him in Eloise, that his visions were true, because now for the first time I saw the world he saw, and it moved. When we reached its shadow, it moved. Did Mom scream because she also saw what we saw, or because she knew that she was dying of it? He wrenched the wheel, he stepped on the gas, he shouted and lost control, and we soared past unblinking, glistening reptilian eyes, black slit pupils the size of fists within green irises. They had turned to follow our flight. I saw a morning sky bare of complications. The sky tumbled. Dearborn wheeled into view, long chimneys plugged into the slate sky. There was a hiss like my father's sigh, amplified 1,000 times. I sailed through the air, the Superman of my dreams. I ended beside the road, watching the Ford settle in a nimbus of dust and smoke, rocking on its back, wheels spinning, a frantic bug that suddenly took fire. Brakes screeched, people ran toward us. There was no sign of the reptile.
And that's how Eugene Victor Smith became an author and began his life in Detroit.
Yeah, he was 10 years old.
Amazing.
And the next stop for him was, after the hospital, was the orphanage.
I dare any of you out there to find this book, read this introduction, and then not purchase it. That's the dare. The book is called Home for Sale. The author, Leo Litwak. And this has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.